In a time where there's more and more questions about culture in NFL locker rooms and offensive geniuses being needed for young, elite quarterbacks, the New England Patriots decided to take the culture hire, not the offensive genius hire. We're going to talk a little bit about how that can affect coaching around the league and what that can mean for your dynasty teams. We're also going to talk about what we learned, what we got right, what we got wrong. If you're new here, like and subscribe. Let's get right into Dynasty Points tonight.
What?
Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
Ladies and gents, we're here. It's Tuesday night. It's Dynasty Points. We're back live. I'm excited. The off season has already begun. There's already so many takes out there in existence that are tilting. There's already players being cut from playoff teams that were once said to be the best wide receiver on the Ravens roster. Deontay Johnson was cut. We're not here to
Must
talk.
be the worst hang in human history. Like, I just want to know how unpleasant this guy is to be around. Like, he must just be unbelievably annoying.
Yeah, it is brutal, but look, I'm excited because this is the time of year we get to really. Last year we talked about the coaching cycle. This year we once again get to talk about the coaching cycle. Mike Vrabel was a big topic on this program last year. I said he should be hired. He wasn't hired. Then it was he's going to go be the head coach at like Ohio State. And then it was he's going to go be the head coach at Alabama, or he's going to go hop onto a defensive coordinator. And really, he just kind of floated around the rest. But it turns out he's now the head coach of the New England Patriots. Let's talk about it. Brian, you're the New England Patriots guy. The Discord always seems to tag you like you have insider information on the New England Patriots. Do you think they made the right hire, the wrong hire for obviously what they're going for? They did choose culture, and I want to talk about that.
So I think it's very easy to say that the Patriots chose culture. But what the Patriots actually chose is, or what I should say, what Robert Kraft actually chose is the guy that he thinks the fan base will be most satisfied with. That's what this hire is about. They have known they were going to hire Vrabel for weeks, as was made very clear by the very limited and strategic interviews that they did aside from Vrabel. Limited and strategic is how I would describe those interviews. And I guess my biggest issue, regardless of what you think of Vrabel as a football coach, and I tend to think he'll do a decent job. I believe in hiring offensive head coaches because generally if you hire a defensive head coach and your offense has success with whatever boy genius coordinator you bring in, guess what? They're getting hired away within a year or two if it actually works out. So I have concerns about that, obviously, just with any defensive head coach hire. But I guess the refusal to interview around the league, there are so many deserving coordinators on both sides of the ball, really, that you should be interviewing. Robert Kraft brought up Drake Maye as the replacement to Bill Belichick as early as 4 or 5 years ago, if we're to believe the media reports from last offseason. That was always the succession plan, is Drake Maye is going to come in after Bill and kind of take on the team. Now the succession plan is we're just reaching back into more former Patriots players. This one at least has coaching experience, at least has a resume of some moderate success in the NFL. My understanding from people I talk to is that Vrabel is much more well-respected in NFL circles. Players generally think he's good at building a culture. He can do all of these things that they're selling to the fan base. I don't think he's going to be a Gerard Mayo-esque fraud. I've listened to Vrabel talk to the media today, and I can tell you he does that better than Gerard Mayo, which is a very low bar.
I mean, he didn't throw a bunch of people under the bus for no reason.
Yeah, they ask him, "Are you going to hire Josh McDaniels?" And he knows how to dodge the question gracefully, saying, "Oh yeah, we have a really long list of candidates. Yeah, I'm friends with Josh, blah, blah, blah." Like, he knows how to handle a media question that's not like, "Oh yeah, maybe we should bench Ramondre Stevenson," like random reporter. You're right. And maybe I will completely ruin my credibility with the team by turning this into a dramatic thing for 2 separate weeks at different points in the season. Yeah, I don't think we're going to get any of the train wreck stuff like that. I'm just very disappointed as a Patriots fan that they didn't even seem to be that interested in hiring Ben Johnson, who is arguably one of the better head coaching candidates that has been available over the last several years. So, yeah, am I surprised? No, I assumed they were going to hire Vrabel the whole time, but I am disappointed. I'm embarrassed, as I always am, by this organization. I think I laid it all out there. That's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, I also believe like last year with the Mayo thing, when they hired Van Pelt, what I said on this program was, we don't know how good he's going to be. Like, we don't know these first year play callers. I can see why someone like people like the Kraft family would be like, no, we want culture in the building, culture over everything, etc. Especially you get some reports like, man, it was not Mike McDonald, the Dolphins head coach, whose name is
Mike McDaniel. Yeah.
Mike McDaniel, saying like, what am I supposed to do? Keep finding these guys? Like, they don't care. We're getting players like George Pickens was late to the game on Christmas. There was that report. Like, culture is shifting. And if you listen to the Vrabel interview today, like, he kind of said the same thing, where he talked about like, accountability with players. And I don't know if that was a problem in the Patriots building, but I could see Kraft being like, we made a terrible mistake. We need to fix it. Because obviously they drafted their quarterback. They like him. Now they're entrusting like this experienced head coach to take that next step with him. You're right, though. The offensive coordinator spot is going to be huge for them. Like, I don't think they run it back with Van Pelt. Jacob, what do you got?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be an immediate upgrade, right? The Mayo hire was a disaster. He it's not nice from like a human perspective to say a person deserved to get fired after 1 year, but
Mayo
he needed to get terminated. He was clearly just in way over his head. And frankly, it was probably a disservice to his eventual coaching career that he was put in that position to fail that publicly with a roster that bad, in terms of probably damaging his future prospects of being a defensive coordinator in the league. You just look at how unprepared the team was from a week-to-week basis, from not being able to line up correctly, not understanding basic diagnosis, blocking techniques, etc. Like, it's just clear that whatever was going on Monday through Saturday was a disorganized mess. Vrabel's going to clean that up, right? I mean, if nothing else, like, Vrabel has proven in Tennessee, like, he is a professional head coach. He understands how to communicate to players. He understands how to teach players. He understands how to instill a system of communication and accountability. When the Patriots show up on Sundays, they might not be very good, but they will be a professional football team under Mike Vrabel. That's going to be night and day difference. I think my biggest issue with it, like the Vrabel, that type of head coach, it's not for me. Like, I would always prefer, in particular with a second-year quarterback who just was subjected to a tire fire. Like, he had 2 different offensive coordinators in both of his 2 different years at UNC. Just had a 3rd offensive coordinator. He's about to have his 4th play caller in 4 years. I would just be more interested in finding a head coach that is also a play caller, that can develop the most important asset on my franchise, which if you're the New England Patriots, Drake Maye is like arguably the only important asset on your franchise, given where the rest of the roster is. And they're at a point now where, I mean, frankly, some of the Josh McDaniel stuff is not good to me. That's not a hire that gives me a whole lot of encouragement.
The entire fan base wants, which it concerns me because
Pats fans are weird. I deal with a lot of Pats fans because I'm a Celtics fan, and they're weird. I mean, the one thing I guess you can say for McDaniels is no one is ever going to hire him to be a head coach again. So if he is successful, you will have your offensive coordinator for a long time. The fear to me is like you're either going to hire Josh McDaniels, which to me is a very uninspiring hire, or you hire potentially someone more inspiring, and then he gets hired away, and then you're on offensive coordinator number 5 in 5 years. Like that's the stuff that would be really scary for me. I would rather invest in that. And then I think what's just more upsetting to me, and again, I mean, I'm not a Patriots fan, but I have a lot of Drake Maye stock, not just from like a dynasty portfolio standpoint, but just from like a take having standpoint. I had a lot of overzealous opinions about him. I want to be right over time. I want him to have a great career. Just the process is so bad where like realistically, what does it cost you to bring in other guys for effectively free consults on your team, right? Like what does it hurt you to have Todd Monken, Liam Cohen, Joe Brady, other folks just come in and let you know what their plan would be for your offense, even if you're not going to hire them? Like, wouldn't you want to pick these guys' brains? Wouldn't you want to hear them out? Wouldn't you want to have conversations with some of the smartest offensive designers in the NFL? Like, it's just bizarre to me. It's like, okay, we'll interview Ben Johnson to placate the fans. We'll address the Rooney Rule in the most expedient way possible, and then we will hire the guy that we were clearly going to hire always. It's just tough for me, and it's tough when it's an organization that hasn't done anything in several years, and then clearly the hiring process is mostly based on like who has played for or coached for the New England Patriots in the recent history. And it's like, can we look outside of ourselves? All that being said, I mean, I'm going to have the same take on this that I had. We talked about it with the Chargers last year a lot. We talked about it a lot with the Cowboys 2 years ago when people were thinking that the whole Mike McCarthy from Kellen Moore thing was going to be to boomer it up. Like, just in general, I think that when we get new coaches or we get coaches in new environments or coaches with new players, we tend to have sometimes a lot of certainty as a fantasy community about what their play calling tendencies are going to be, who's going to be a clown of a coach, who's going to be a great coach, in what way they're going to coach. Like, if there is a sentiment that, you know, the Patriots are going to run this prehistoric offense and it's not going to have any chance to succeed, and you want to avoid all the Patriots because Vrabel's going to run the ball like he did in Tennessee, like I'm not saying that that's not necessarily the most likely scenario. I just am always willing to bet against that if I'm getting paid to do it in the market. So, I mean, I was going to be in on Drake Maye regardless, but I'm excited at least for that prospect that we won't be getting like the Ben Johnson helium on this offense. We'll probably get a lot of pessimism on this offense in the market.
Well, that's one thing. Like, obviously, I have Drake Maye, the ADP QB 10 over on Dynasty Data Lab. Now that drafts, because you degenerates are out there drafting away, drafts are starting to roll in for that live ADP. And you're right. I think if we got a Cohen, Johnson, and I swear if anyone takes my Todd Monken, I'm going to lose it, then I think that would automatically jump it. I think
someone's going to hire this guy, man. I don't understand it. I know you don't want to lose him, but like,
I'm tired of losing our coordinators.
Maybe he's just an asshole or doesn't have a good person. I don't know, but like, I'm really confused why he hasn't gotten more looks. I don't understand it. I think I get the Ben Johnson appeal, obviously, but like, you're talking about a guy who has designed successful offenses in several different levels, multiple NFL teams, multiple college programs, been a successful college head coach. I know that was a very small program at Southern Miss, but like, we're on a 4-year run of potentially coaching back-to-back national championship offenses and then back-to-back MVP quarterback seasons. Like, just no one's interested in that. And a guy who's done it in an air raid system, he's done it in a pro-style system, he's done it in a zone read, run-heavy system. Like, it's a guy who's proven that he has such a strong command of offensive design that it's not like he just walks around forcing his scheme on everybody. He shows up to a new place with new players. He says, "What can I do with this?" He designs a completely different offense every time. Like I think he's a genius.
So I think there's a couple of things that we don't as fans like look at. And some of it is A, do they want to be a head coach? That's another thing. And B, can they maintain their offensive efficiency while running an entire operation? So I think that's why teams are going to start heading back towards the defensive coordinator / culture coach. I think what Dan Campbell has done in Detroit has made that kind of clear. I think John Harbaugh, for as much as he gets ragged on by Ravens fandom, it's something that he consistently does. Andy Reid doesn't call, like he relies on his offensive coordinator these days. I think culture and overall head coaches are going to continue to be a strong, needed thing in the NFL now, especially with culture problems in the league. Like it's a big thing. Like not every coordinator becomes a good head coach. In fact, it's rare.
Yeah.
So
I agree with what you're saying, Thomas, and I understand like that concern, of course. But from a team's perspective, from an organization's perspective, hopefully the way that you get some insight into, okay, well, this guy's an amazing coordinator. Does he actually have the communication and the management skills to lead a football team? Hopefully you bring the guy in for an interview and at least try to figure that out, right? You would think that would be your goal for a Todd Monken, for a Liam Cohen. Yeah, we should get them in the building, ask them some challenging questions, and see how they respond in an environment like that.
Yeah.
It's not just, I refuse to believe that only defensive head coaches can be strong culture.
No, I agree.
I agree. We have to be looking and evaluating candidates and trying to find that perfect head coach that is an offensive genius and can also instill a culture. And I think there's a decent shot that that's what Ben Johnson is, or what Ben Johnson is going to try to do at the very least. So yeah, I don't know. It's just frustrating to me that well, yes, it's true. The culture stuff matters. It's being used as like a red herring, I think, to distract from the awful process that has taken place in New England.
It was a terrible process in New England. There's no way around it. They basically laughed at the Rooney Rule and how they did their candidates. And like Jacob, you had mentioned, off like panic trying to interview Aaron Glenn, all this stuff that like this was clearly and so obviously, and it didn't help that Vrabel goes and has a great interview with the Jets. Everything goes really well. And then Mayo is fired. And then Vrabel is hired, a week and a half later. It's not, none of it is coincidence, right? It was terrible, but I could understand him being panicky. Like, we need to fix the culture of our team with our new court. Like, we can't risk having the wrong head coach, the wrong offensive coordinator. We just did that to Mac Jones. Look how I can see the pathway for him to making this decision, but you're right. I think it was definitely a mistake, because now what? Drake Maye is probably going to get a new offensive coordinator. That's two offensive coordinators in 2 years. That has an effect. I think it's now, granted, I'm not an NFL head coach, but I think maybe it's easier to fix the running game and fix the defense before it is easier to fix a complex and advanced passing game. I think maybe that kind of goes into it as well. So I think they have a ton of cap space. I think they now have a direction that they know they want to go in. They have their hard-nosed guy that they should have just hired last year. I almost want to say shout out to them for recognizing the mistake, because I don't think that's being done. They recognized that they had a problem. They made a terrible mistake, like Job from Arrested Development. Everyone knew it. He made a terrible mistake. And they corrected it. So there's that. They did it in a shitty way, and they might have picked the wrong guy. Maybe. I liked Vrabel last year. I like him now. Yeah, you can read into the interview today I think it was from today, as much as you want to, with the, throwing it X amount of times, you only win X amount of games, and, fixing the run game and whatever. All that narrative is going to be taken for what you want to hear out of it. But I think what the Patriots did do to cap this off is they got, I think, a good coach at the end of the day. We've seen him be able to put together a good staff. We will forever have the image of him being visibly pissed, knowing that he lost his job the moment they traded away AJ Brown. So you know that he likes his guys and can identify what to do. And we've seen him put together a staff that's put together a good offense with Arthur Smith, which would be hilarious if they just went after him again. I think that would be.
I can't let this stand. The first hire that Vrabel made for the Titans as OC was Matt LaFleur. Just to be clear, I think there is an outside chance Vrabel brings in like a young Shanahan-esque.
Well,
I do think there's a chance. I don't think it's going to be Arthur Smith. The most likely outcome that will piss me off is Josh McDaniels. And
well, look,
if anyone wants to like go through my Twitter history, can at Ryan J_Heath quotes Josh McDaniels. You'll find lots of gems from the 2020 through 2022 era with Josh McDaniels there.
You sound like me and Greg Roman.
I mean, I don't even think I kind of feel the same way. So I almost feel the same. I mean, Vrabel's a way more likable person, but I feel similarly about Josh McDaniels as OC that I do about Vrabel as head coach, where it's like, it's objectively kind of fine. It's just not for me. Like, I don't think that McDaniel is a bad offensive coordinator. Like, he has had a lot of success as an offensive coordinator, especially had success the rookie year of Mac Jones, probably the most impressive thing on his resume. I mean, his offense in Las Vegas the first year I thought was fine. It was very fantasy friendly because they consolidated everything on Jacobs and Adams.
Dynasty wide receiver 2, Hunter Renfrow after that year.
No, I don't think that was that year.
Wasn't it?
Renfrow was the Gruden year, and then McDaniels immediately banished him to the shadow realm.
Right. You're right. Correct. Yeah. Sorry.
Because he was playing Mac Hollins over him. But I don't know. I think his offense is like fine. It's like it's not that. It's pretty static.
It's extremely vanilla. Yes.
It's just very vanilla, but it's like okay. It's just, yeah. I think he gets a bad rep as an OC. I think some people think he's like a terrible OC, and I don't think that's true. He's a terrible head coach because he's the most unlikable human being on the planet. But like as just a purely offensive coordinator, I think he's fine. It's just that he's just not quite as smart as he thinks he is. that's like, yeah.
From what Ryan was saying, where he says he thinks he brings in someone young and intelligent, I think you're right. I think that's why Tommy Reese got promoted by the Browns, because Vrabel had interest. So you're not wrong there. I think the direction is possible. The thing is I still think he's going to want to install his culture, which is run first, play defense, ask questions later, which can still be super successful for someone like Drake Maye. This is a long-term play. Obviously, they need receivers. Clearly, Vrabel's okay with, running their offense through one guy, two guys, which, I mean, condensed offenses. We love that in fantasy. I think there's a pathway here. I think the right hires really matter. There's a pathway. You should not fade Drake Maye because of this decision at all. And if you are, I think you're playing fantasy the wrong way. Just personally,
I hope they run him a lot. I think the best thing for Drake with this roster at his level of progression, I would run a very heavy personnel offense because they don't have any wide receivers. And I would lean hard into Drake Maye's athleticism. I would invest at the running back position. I would invest in the interior offensive line. And I would plan to run the ball a lot, including the quarterback in that run game, and then try to take advantage of shot plays off of that. Like I would be signing guards, and I would be drafting a running back in round 3 or round 4. And I would be running the shit out of the ball, but I would want 12 of those carries to be to Drake Maye.
Yep. I don't disagree with any of that. I think we hit it. Terry Taco says also love that name. Tannehill style. You're right. They can do it. I think they got I think they can get the pieces. Lots of cap space. This is a bad year from what Brett Whitefield told me, that if you want to fix your offensive line, this is apparently
but there are guards
year to do that.
There's no tackles, but there are guards. Trey Smith is available. Will Fries is available. Like you can get interior guys. It's just there's no
I will
talent.
say this: it will not be a bad thing if you roster Ramondre Stevenson. However, they're
Patriots
drafting somebody.
The Patriots need to add a running back with some juice.
Well, they have Antonio Gibson, Jacob.
I don't care what shit.
Twitter favorite Antonio Gibson under contract.
Ramondre is fine, but like
he's a plotter.
He's like a different. I just don't think he fits with where this offense needs to go. I want like a Travion Henderson on this team. I want someone fun.
Yeah, but I'm just saying I don't think rostering Stevenson will be bad this year.
Yeah.
At all. I think it'll be fine.
He's like, if we are instituting kind of Jacob's vision here, which I don't think is a bad idea. Ramondre is not really that style of back. I'd say his worst skill is just the inside grinder type stuff. That's where people get the idea that he's a plotter. Ramondre Stevenson used to be a relatively explosive back in space. At different times in his career here, we've just kind of used him as this inside grinder guy. I don't think that's his skill set at all. So I would agree that if that is kind of the plan, then you should probably be adding to the backfield.
Yeah, it's the draft to do it. Obviously, now multiple people going back already. Singleton, shout out Brett Whitefield, who left him off of his tier list. We were all wondering why. Probably
Both
had
Penn State running backs going back.
He probably had a little bit of inside info on that one, knowing Brett, but that's why. So shout out Brett. I think we hit it overall. Let's rank. Just because it's in the title and it's on a thumbnail, did the Patriots make a mistake in 2025 hiring Mike Vrabel? Yes or no? Just easy. Yes or no?
I think they made a mistake in the way that they hired Mike Vrabel.
I like that. Jacob's classic cop out. Ryan,
that's exactly what I was going to say.
Of course,
I will give you a yes or no. I'm going to go with no.
I'll say no as well. No. I'll say no, but the next round of hires matter. Like, obviously, I mean, they might need a new GM. I mean, the McConkey trade looks worse.
They have a new GM. His new GM is named Mike Vrabel.
Yeah. You're not wrong,
I'm serious.
I know.
I mean, it's been reported. They bring in, is it Ryan Cowan? From the Giants, which is an interesting organization to take front office people from. But they actually had a really good draft this year, so I'll give them that. And then, yeah, I mean, they got Tracy and shout out Drew Phillips,
Theo Johnson,
slot corner that they got in the third round. Yeah, so they bring him in, and from the sounds of it, it's him and Wolf are both reporting to Vrabel, and he has final say on personnel.
Yeah, okay, I like that. That's smart. I like that. I like that a lot. I think you can look at Brian Dabble as a Dabble.
I wish that he had got fired, because that would be, I think he would have been the offensive coordinator of the Patriots, and I think that would have been fantastic.
I was just going to say, I think he's the type of person you look at where you go, great offensive coordinator, went to a head coaching gig, and it just didn't work out. Like, that would be the guy you target as a rebound OC candidate who's like really driven. He would have been the perfect spot because he was the QB whisperer. Right,
and he has Belichick ties, so it would be perfect. That's the only people that they hire, so it would work.
That's right. All right, that's gonna do it for this part. When we come back from this quick break, we're gonna talk a little bit about what we learned from the 2024 fantasy season and keep this train moving. You're gonna want to sit tight. Okay. Obviously, if you're watching this, you see like and subscribe. You're going to want to hit that like and subscribe button. It helps us out. There is no off season for us. We don't get to take breaks. We do not rest. It is nonstop action here at Dynasty Points, like never before. As promised, and every like and subscribe, a comment goes a long way. So why don't you leave a comment after this is over and let us know what you learned from 2024. We'll read it, and then we may take the best ones and talk about it next week on next week's episode. But I want to dive right in here with what we learned. Ryan, I want to start with you. Obviously, Dynasty Fantasy Football is the type of game where you constantly have to be learning at all times. The second you think you're comfortable or you know something for sure, everything gets flipped on you. So let's talk about what you learned here that you wanted to highlight specifically on this show in 2024.
Yeah. So from a dynasty perspective, especially, I think looking back and reflecting on how I approached this past offseason and this past season, I was very in on these sort of late first rookie picks, late first to early second rookie picks, specifically the running backs, the Jonathon Brookses, the Trey Bensons, even the Blake Corums were a little bit cheaper. But you sit back and you look at that trio, especially. Actually, you can throw a Marshawn Lloyd in there as well, I suppose.
You didn't get
all of these guys. Yeah, I know. All of these guys have had
Dynasty Points favorite Marshawn Lloyd.
Hey, shout out Jalen Wright too. It's not like he did much better.
No.
Yeah. All of these guys have had pretty much the worst run out of a rookie season that you could ask for pretty much from a running back on day 2 that is coming in not plopped into first on the depth chart, right? That's always kind of our first tier of rookie dynasty running back assets is, okay, a guy that's drafted, is he going to be the starter immediately? There was none of that really this year, right? My stance on all of these guys pretty much was for a running back to get that type of draft capital, they're going to get a shot eventually, right? And they must be a decently safe pick in terms of they should hold their value through 2024. Even if they don't get on the field that much, kind of regardless of what happens, it's going to be priced in. People will understand. People will be patient with these guys. I think that's just been resoundingly proved wrong in all of these cases. Obviously, awful injury run out for Jonathon Brooks. That stuff is just super sad. Corum getting injured in a meaningless Week 18 game after not really cracking the offense whatsoever the entire time. James Conner getting extended just in Trey Benson's face, with Benson hurt down the stretch and never having that much of a chance to ever be the number 1 guy, and Lloyd being hurt the entire season, including an emergency appendectomy. So I guess what I've learned here is, number 1, teams will re-sign veterans that are playing well, full stop. Chuba Hubbard went and balled out this year. James Conner also went and balled out this year. Neither of those organizations even blinked before extending these 26-plus-year-old running backs for a couple more seasons, effectively killing the rookie contract value of those picks that they had just made. But we have to sit there and eat that in Dynasty, unfortunately. And the reason that I want to bring this up is because of something Jacob has talked about a lot over the past year, which is that there are organizations in the NFL that value running backs and organizations that don't. This is a really good running back class. I'm sure we're going to get some guys that are in instant impact spots where they'll actually get on the field and either gain or lose dynasty value from there. But I'm sure there will be a crop of guys that are drafted as the presumptive RB2s on their team. These are not safe picks like a wide receiver or whatever that is going to have value insulation. This league will still just chew up and spit out running backs. And I just want to keep that in mind for myself going into this next season, because it's just a losing strategy, both in redraft and in dynasty. So I always rail against, don't draft the anointed most expensive handcuffs in redraft. It's kind of similar in dynasty, where we anoint these guys because of the recent draft capital, but ultimately they don't show anything on the field or are completely blocked from a chance to show anything on the field, then it's not going to matter. It's not going to increase the value of your dynasty roster.
Yeah, good players that play well earn money, and that's it. I think I love I'm just going to draft running backs in the second round. I think I'm going to continue to do that. But when that player has a productive veteran, especially like in the James Conner case, maybe let's not just assume that they're just going to die off. I think that would have been, I think the Jonathon Brooks play was, risky because of injury. I don't think anyone expected Chuba Hubbard to do what he did. But when he started to do what he was doing and then re-sign him, we should have taken that into account. Now you add the double ACL tear, which is dreadful, and it kind of helps in hindsight to, I never should have done that, sure. But I think when you get elite wide receiver prospects, I think I'm done taking the maybe running back. Oh, I thought maybe I would have been done with Javonte in this regard. Then I did it again with Brooks. I think I'm now officially done forever with this, maybe the running back over elite wide receiver prospects like Brian Thomas Jr., etc. I mean, I remember though James Cook at 110 was my call a couple years ago, and that kind of panned out, but still. Yeah, I think you're definitely right, Ryan. I think we need to take these vet running backs a little bit more seriously than maybe we were before.
Yeah, those two getting contract extensions never entered really my consideration set for the range of outcomes when I was evaluating like the Jonathan Brooks or the Trey Benson decision. And to me, that's an issue that should have been at least something I was willing to consider as part of my process, because obviously it was in the range of outcomes. So when something's totally outside of your consideration set, I think that should always be a signal to turn back and evaluate what it is that you're doing.
That's a great way to phrase that. And that's something every Dynasty player can apply. I've been guilty of doing it. I think we've all been guilty of doing it at times. I think that's great. I'm going to go with my first one because I had a couple I couldn't really decide. So I'm not going to get too in depth into all of them, but I'll go to break up me just talking for half an hour and losing all of our subscribers. To me, one thing I learned is, really, I'm sorry, I absolutely just found it. This year more than ever, staying away from player takes. Now, I say this quite often, that if you rely on player takes, it can hurt you more than anything else. That's why I focus so hard on just playing the market. But staying away from player takes made you a ton of money this year. JSN, Darnold, Henry, Jacobs, Jaden Reed in a negative light. You were just so convinced that if someone was so convinced that Jaden Reed was just this good because they liked his rookie profile and they didn't dive in any further into it, you just held on to him no matter what because you liked the player, that hurt you this year. All examples of these players that had strong opinions attached to them helped you win. Like you could get Derrick Henry for 2 mid-seconds this offseason, maybe an early second around draft time. And it turns out that was a smash for you every single time. But he was looked down upon. He was old. And I did this with quite a few players, and it burned me. No more. I am now going to look at every single situation objectively. JSN was a big one for me. His price tag in the 6th, 7th round, I'm going to touch on this more later. His 6th, 7th round price tag should have been a smash. Instead, I made the decision on the player without looking at every other possibility at all times. And it cost me. It cost me money. It cost me way too much time in my DMs. It cost me a lot. And I think if people just stayed away from extremism and extreme player takes and anchoring in, I think we'll all become better Dynasty players, because locking in on player takes can kill you. It can absolutely kill your Dynasty team. It sets you up for terrible decisions, terrible trades, terrible roster construction, and oh no, there's an orphan now. And I find it a lot with quarterbacks. That's a big one. That's why I always just play the quarterback market. But as TD is saying in the chat, he's going to stay a little bit more grounded, a little less extreme, be more flexible. That's the key. I learned this a little bit more every year, but this year it really burned me. I refused to draft any running back this year. That was my thing. I passed on 7th round Ken Walker, 6th round Ken Walker. That was a mistake. I refused to draft HN in the 5th round. That was a mistake. I'll just take a receiver. That receiver didn't do as well. I'll tell you that much in the 5th round. So my I was heavy Sam Laporta. No way this can fail. The player is too good. Turned out he was good down the stretch. I mean, if you were still in the playoff hunt with Sam Laporta, it was awesome for you. Getting there with him was a nightmare. So being that locked in on a take hurt me. It probably hurt a bunch of other people. In 2025, we're turning that around. We're going to be even more annoying with how neutral we are on player takes and even more in on value assessment than we've ever been. So Ryan, your eyes had better be ready to roll even harder when I say,
wait, I wasn't rolling my eyes. What?
Every time I said I'll take who's cheaper, you roll your eyes at me.
Oh, yes.
I want you to be ready for that eye roll because I'm going to tell you that I am staying even more neutral on players and their evaluations than I've ever been before.
I thought you were calling me out for roll my eyes like just now live.
No.
I'm reading chat, brother. Like, sorry, my eyes move. They can't be completely fixed on the camera the entire time.
Now, normally...
Getting nervous there. I thought I was being confronted.
No. Normally, I like to throw those at you to see if you're like coming up with a tweet like Scott would or in the DMs with Scott, but not this time. Just stating that you're going to roll your eyes at me even more this offseason. Jacob, what did you learn from the 2024 season?
I don't know how long this is going to last because the NFL is a cyclical game. Football is a cyclical sport, but I think it's at least here to stay in the short to medium term. The moral arc of the football universe is not just consistently trending towards passing 95% of the time. It kind of looked like it was for a while there. We had a lot of the breakthroughs and tendencies that we were finding where it was like, well, actually, you can run play action just as effectively, almost regardless of your rushing success rate, almost regardless of your called run rate. The gap between EPA per pass, EPA per run was to the extent that almost every team, even bad passing teams, were averaging higher EPA per pass than EPA per run. Pass rate in general was just going up and up and up and up across the league. And then the last couple of years, defenses started to neutralize that. And we were going to see, is this a blip or is this going to just start to revert back? And it really is starting to revert back in a big way towards the ground game. And it makes sense. We're seeing when the pass game was really taking off, you had NFL defenses that were just lining up in base personnel almost regardless of what you wanted to do on first and second down. And you had to do very little. You could show up in 11 personnel. You could show up in 11 personnel with a tight end who doesn't even really block. And you could just pass all the time. And that was the way to do it because the personnel was so beneficial to you. But as defensive coordinators have gotten smarter with their personnel usage, they use lighter boxes, they use more nickel and dime packages. And as they're becoming just a lot more creative in their ability to get pressure with four guys, with simulated pressures that you see guys like Brian Flores use where they're walking up a million guys to line and you don't know who's coming and who's dropping. You see guys running more and more stunts at higher rates. Defensive coordinators have found ways to push back and to make life difficult on you if you are just going to drop back and obviously pass the football. And so as we see this more running and more heavy personnel, it really changes how we have to view not just like running backs, but every position in fantasy football in this window of time that I think we're still going to be in for at least a couple of years until maybe the offense comes up with their next counterpunch. And that to me is like, first off, with teams able to actually run the ball more, there's way more value out there for these running backs who can compile a lot of volume in terms of carries. If you think back 10 years ago, there was these guys that have 300 carries. And then a while ago, there was no one who was getting 300 carries. And so you could pretty much just ignore any running back that wasn't going to make a massive impact in the passing game because they couldn't hurt you with that big ceiling. We saw that reverse this year. In the biggest position, I think that might be affected more than anything is the tight end position because you can't play a wide tight end in today's NFL that doesn't block. So you have to either play a tight end that's in that tweener mold as a second tight end detached from the line, which means they have to be better than a slot wide receiver to get on the field, or they need to be a tight end who's willing to get dirty and block, right? And that's why we've seen, I always think about it in basketball because I remember I play a little bit of fantasy basketball. And like there were guys like Andre Drummond and Greg Monroe who were like these total ballers in fantasy basketball because they would put up a ton of rebounds. And then overnight, the game just changed, and it was like you can't play these guys anymore, like in real basketball anymore. Like they don't have a place in the league anymore. Yeah. And the first round pick that you used to have that was a cheat code, like Hassan Whiteside's not a cheat code because he's not in the NBA anymore. And like that's kind of the Kyle Pitts, Dalton Kincaid thing, where it's like these guys no longer have a position in the NFL. And thus, like the fantasy appeal that was very real just a few years ago of a tight end, it was actually a wide receiver. Like that's not going to work, at least in the short to medium term. So that I think completely changes how we have to view the tight end position. And then a quarterback, we talked about this a ton in one of the earlier episodes of the year, but like with maybe the exception of Joe Burrow this year, who was both an incredible player and was gifted a ridiculously bad defense. Like that was kind of the only guy who got there on passing volume this year. And when I say got there, but like got there to a massive ceiling, right? Everyone else is either getting there with passing touchdowns or they're getting there with rushing, which is really changing, the quarterback position. I think it's devaluing the quarterback position generally. And then it's also just changing the archetypes of quarterbacks. And it's prioritizing the quarterbacks that are in the best schemes, the quarterbacks who are going to be the most efficient, and less of sort of the drop back 600 times guys. Sean's talking about Tucker Kraft. Absolutely. Tucker Kraft is absolutely the platonic ideal of the modern tight end. That other model, like it's going to be fine for Bowers because like Bowers is proven this year, like he is good enough. He is good enough. He is actually good enough to be an elite receiver. So he can just be Puka Nacua with tight end eligibility. That rocks. But that's the bar now. If you're going to be that style of tight end, you have to be Brock Bowers good. You can't be Dalton Kincaid good, or you're kind of nothing.
Yeah. No, I think that's important too. There's the press conference from LaFleur today, speaking of Kraft, talking about, I think, we need a main guy, something about him being capable of being in the Kittle role. And I just started drooling, like my mouth was watering, like a steak was in front of me. Like I would give me 8 games of that just so I can die happy. Kraft is an absolute animal. And he can do everything. He's phenomenal. By the way, I believe he's now my dynasty tight end, like 6. So shout out. I updated my tight end ranks. So, hoping and praying there. Tight end's back to sucking. I think you're right. The quarterback thing, I've been saying this for years, and it's nice that it has finally kind of come around. You either need volume, insane efficiency, or running, and then a combination of all of it to be at the top. Burrow is him. Like you look at the ADP, he's the pylon right now. It's like Allen, Lamar, Daniels, Jamar Chase, and then Burrow, right? Like that's it. So I think you nailed that. Same with tight end. I think we're back to just kind of where we were forever because the NFL works in cycles. It's just is what it is. I think that was a great lesson. Like I said, leave a comment below. Let us know what you've learned. Obviously, TD, you let us know in the chat. If you're listening to this on podcast form, guess what? You can go to the YouTube channel at youtube.com/fantasypts. Find the video. It'll be front page. Leave a comment. Let us know. You can still contact us even if you are on podcast format. We read every comment, every single one of them. So if you leave one, there's a good chance myself or someone else will reply to you. Just so you know, you are heard because we appreciate you for tuning in with us. This is the first live for 2025, by the way. Pretty so kind of glossed by that at the beginning, but shout out. First live for 2025. Quick break. When we come back, you know what? It's okay to talk about what you got right. You should talk about what you did get right because this game is hard. Fantasy football is difficult. It is a bitch of a game. So when you get something right, you should celebrate it and you should talk about it. It is not obnoxious so long as you do the other part of that, which we will do a little bit towards the end. So sit tight. When we come back, we're going to talk about what we got right. You're not going to want to miss it. Okay. Leave a comment and let us know what you guys got right, especially if it went against what we said. Because guess what? It helps us learn. We're not afraid of it. We don't shy away from it. TD says this episode is phenomenal. Shout out to you, TD. We love you. Let's talk about what we got right. I'm going to start with probably one of my favorite things that I got right this year. And again, I've written so much stuff on this show sheet that I cannot find it. Well, I'll just say one thing I got right this year was CJ Stroud being the worst possible pick that you could make at 103. I stood tall on this one. People came at me for this one. Jacob Sanderson came at me for this one.
Well, this will be in my what I got wrong.
Yeah.
Section.
And to me, that has just solidified my take on quarterbacks and how important it is to, like Jacob just mentioned, the things that we learned. This is all going to tie together because that's how you grow as a show. This really just proves it. But I will be even more aggressive in my anti-pylon quarterback drafting and trading for. I will be even more into that mid-round quarterback and late-round quarterback philosophy, unless there is just proven rushing or they're just in a McShanahan-esque system or Sean Payton. Like that's what we were looking for now at this point, and that really just solidified it for me. So CJ Stroud, worst pick at the 103. Got that one right. Let's go to Ryan.
Yeah, there's in terms of stuff I got right. I've listed out some names. I kind of want to quickly go through and list them, but also say why I got it right or how I was led to this, because I think that's kind of the important part, right? It's not look at me, I got all these things right, all these players did well. It's this is how I arrived at this. Can I apply this going forward? Devon Achane, I kind of just exactly called the exact season he was going to have, which was, this is the most efficient rookie on a per touch basis that has ever entered the league. It's year 2. We have all this data about what running backs tend to do in year 2, especially after efficient seasons. And the kind of wrinkle with Achane was, can he take it to the next level in the passing game? Is Raheem Mostert going to be a problem? I don't think this always works. I think for it to work, you need a head coach or an OC or what have you, an offensive mind there that is going to buy into, I want to find ways to make my best players make plays. Mike McDaniel obviously kind of ticked that box, at least preseason, whatever mud we'd like to sling at him now, that was clearly kind of what was going to happen. Kind of every interview he would give was, yeah, like Devon is amazing and we're looking for all these different ways to get the ball in his hands. Like we're going to be very creative. He was making it sound much more mysterious than it probably should have been. It's like we're actually going to throw the ball to him 100 times like that. He could have come out and said that and made it easier on people. But when an efficient player is being teased for any sort of role expansion, I'm going to be open-minded to that and I'm going to buy into it. Chase Brown is another one. I was very famously not into Chase Brown until about late June, when we started actually hearing from the GM, from the head coach, that they legitimately view them as that they legitimately viewed Brown and Moss as 50-50 players. This is how they want to split their backfield. That was kind of what we saw early in the season. As soon as they were willing to say that, I was like, okay, I'll get on board again with the per touch efficiency from Chase Brown. That
didn't trust us, but no, just had to hear it from the coaches.
Well, because there is a long history of running backs that are good on a per touch basis in limited roles as rookies, who never get on the damn field as sophomores.
I know.
It's just being realistic. But yeah, I mean, once that hurdle was kind of cleared, it became very obvious to me.
And it did look bleak at first.
Yes, it very much did for a couple of weeks. Yeah.
Yeah, the first like 3 weeks, it was not looking good.
Oh yeah. And I guess kind of the last guy I want to touch on is Ladd McConkey, just because this stuck out so much in my head, both from the offseason and obviously now after the rookie season he's had. We have like these film versus analytics wars that flare up every offseason in terms of what's the best way to evaluate prospects. Whenever both of those kind of approaches agree on a player, especially one that is not like a consensus top 10 talent in the NFL that is going in the top 5 picks of rookie drafts, if all the film guys like Ladd McConkey and all the data guys that know what they're doing like Ladd McConkey, you should probably just smash that player.
Yeah.
I have trouble thinking of a counterexample where the film guys and the per route stats and all of that both looked amazing on a player and he like totally flopped. Usually we get this and it's been pretty incredible.
Yeah.
So that's always like that's going to be like the thing I'm looking out for this offseason as we get into rookie prospect season is what guys are both sides of that coming to a quick consensus on. Yeah.
Man, I had BTJ and Ladd ahead of Xavier Worthy. And right before the beginning of the season, I let my gut be affected by Twitter, like a late night Taco Bell run. And I moved Xavier Worthy up a spot. And I had it right, and I should have just stuck with it the whole time. But that is what it is. Couple more. I had a couple written down here, so I want to mention a few more. We can go back and forth here a little bit, as well as a group here. But I feel like it's important to mention Chris Godwin, our king, our god. Shout out. I think from the very beginning of the offseason I was in, round 9 was a hilarious ADP value. He could be your 6th wide receiver on a team. He was carrying you. One of the few, 20-point wide receivers we even had this year for any stretch. He was a god and was on pace to be like top 2 wide receivers, even top 1. I said he would finish on this show. I was the only one that said he would finish like inside that top 10. And he was on pace. He was going to do it. 100% he was going to do it. Now we had some positives that came from him getting hurt, like the running back god Bucky Irving, who I could also have put on the I was right, but I'll be honest, everything I learned about Bucky Irving came from Zoltan, so I'll give all credit to him. He was the one that put me on. I can't take any credit for that at all. But absolutely was right about Chris Godwin in round 9. He was an absolute smash. And then I'll say fading Javonte Williams. Oh my God. Is the lowest on him in the company. I put up fights in every single one of our projection meetings leading up to the season. I fought against him on this program, which sucks because I was so in on him early. And I was just happy to fade him at every cost. He was not worth it, period. So those two, very happy to be right on that one.
Yeah, top ones for me. 2 of them already been mentioned. I put Ladd on my list as well. It was, easily one of the things that I definitely got the most grief on from Twitter was having Ladd wide receiver 4. Definitely not all the analytics people were in on Ladd. That was Ryan might have a different memory of spring than I do. The arguments over the per route stuff versus the volume stuff, and the case to me with Ladd, and this kind of ties in with the film case for Ladd, in my opinion, which is when it's not all of the per route translations are created equal. But what made Ladd different is like you dive into how is he winning on these routes. And it's not just he's a per route god because he comes in to run like 5 bubble screens. It's like he's just winning on NFL routes against all forms of coverage in college, and he's doing it from the flanker position, he's doing it from the slot position, but he's winning on inbreakers, he's winning on outbreakers, he's winning on real boy routes. And so when you combine that NFL translatable game to the per route profile, I think that's when you get an undervalued prospect. And obviously the film stuff backs that up. And that was a big part of what really sold me on him, was seeing guys like Matt Harmon. Sultan mentioned too. I was a big Ladd McConkey fan. So that was one. And then Brock Bowers. I mean, I said like so many memeable things about Brock Bowers all summer that like if he was bad, I don't think I could have lived down. I think best football player of all time was one thing that I had said. And so like him being a mega super smash was huge. He was my highest drafted rookie, even counting like 4th rounders. And then I will take partial credit for Bucky Irving. I mean, I don't think anyone was a bigger Bucky person than Mike, than Zoltan, but he was my highest drafted best ball running back. Was definitely a guy where, to me, it was just, you had the combination of Rachaad White being bad, and just knowing Rachaad White was bad, and then Bucky being very cheap and being a guy that, again, I think was undervalued in terms of over-reliance on the height, weight, speed stuff versus a dude who I think a lot of the other metrics suggest he was quite good. I thought he was quite good on film. And then probably the biggest for me, I mean, obviously the end of the season was horrible, but my guy Scam Darnold, just out there carrying to a 14-win Vikings team, leading a perfectly happy, a good fantasy offense. We will see what happens next year, but that was easily the most fun part of the season to me, and the most infuriating part of the season, because every single time that I ever hit on one of these scammy quarterbacks, immediately my mental health goes in the drain when people say they're actually good, but then we all got to watch the playoff game. So we'll see who it is next year.
Yeah, absolutely. Ryan, who else do you got? I got a couple more, but I want to get some from Ryan.
Yeah, I guess one more big one that is, well, we'll go with 2 more. JSN is one. I guess I was bigger on him in redraft than I was in Dynasty. But just the profile of this was a prospect that we were saying a lot of unhinged things about, at least at Fantasy Points. To have the rookie season that he did was obviously a big problem. But kind of in the offseason, I felt like I had the chance to dive into what happened there a little bit more. There were some crazy stats about how he was basically was only ever targeted on 3rd down. Like he clearly was just not a part of the offense as a rookie. Even if he was on the field, they just kind of were pretending he was not, outside of when they would go 3 wide on 3rd down in like the obvious passing situations. And then he would earn targets like a genuinely respectable rookie wide receiver, right? And having Grubb come in, having a new system come in where he had a history of utilizing 3 wide receivers at his previous job in college to a great extent, and just seeing kind of that skill set match there, I think put me in a good spot with JSN. But probably the biggest and the simplest one is Bo Nix for me. I was very vocal in terms of this is a quarterback with top 12 real NFL draft capital on, as Tom mentioned earlier, a Sean Payton offense that has basically never failed to put up at least passable top 24 QB production from a lot of names that you would surprise you that have ever put up that production. So just know that alone was enough for me to say you should basically be clicking this guy's name in the late first anytime you possibly can in rookie drafts. That saved me from a lot of additional Jonathan Brooks exposure, which I appreciate. That's just kind of really it. Yeah, we get way too confident with quarterback evaluations every single offseason without fail. Kind of media narratives will collect around a couple of guys in the quarterback class where these guys aren't as good. And it's funny too, because a lot of that is literally built by opposing front offices trying to do counterintelligence against each other and just put out lies in terms of what they think of players. But yeah, every year we get at least one of those quarterbacks where the media landscape and the fantasy community has just decided that he's awful and is guaranteed to fail. And that was kind of what happened with Bo Nix. Also with Michael Penix, who was even cheaper, and it looks like almost as or even better of a pick right now. So yeah, take the quarterbacks, guys, that are falling in rookie drafts. It's kind of that simple.
I'm glad you mentioned both of those guys, because those are two people that I definitely wanted to mention. I said it before. I've sent you some of the replies that I've gotten, Ryan, on touching on this topic. But when a player becomes a meme on Twitter, buy them. Chances are Twitter's wrong, right? When you step into the Twitter groupthink, go against it more often than not, and you're gonna be better off for it. Those were two players. But like Michael Penix at 204 was the easiest pick possible. Bo Nix at 202, 203 was just as easy. I moved up to grab him a bunch in the 111s, 112s on quarterback needy teams. Granted, I have a lot of them because I am a late round quarterback guy. I do not pay up for that second QB. This draft class saved a lot of rosters, if I'm being honest with you. A lot of those Aaron Rodgers, Stafford teams about to roll over. Those were two absolute smash picks. I want to talk about a couple others. It was on this program on our hot take show. I said Alvin Kamara would finish as the number 2 running back in fantasy football. And when he was shut down for the season, he was the number 2 running back in fantasy football. An insane call at any level. It was insane. Carr was getting hurt. The team was dying around him left, right, and center. And the one thing that maintained was Alvin Kamara's volume. He was finally going to hit 1,000 yards. And then the team sucked so bad between coaches being fired, him being hurt considerably. He got an extent. I was so in, and I'll be in next year too, because his price is probably going to drop a little bit. At least I predict it to drop a little bit. But to predict top 2 at 2 was insane, and I smashed it. I am so proud of that. 100%. I will say that I am also proud to have been a hater once again on the former prince that was promised, Trevor Lawrence. I'll continue to fade Mr. Lawrence. Actually, he's kind of hitting that 5th or 6th round. That's kind of hitting Tommy T by territory. So maybe I'm in this year. You're muted, Jacob, but maybe I'm in this year finally on Trevor Lawrence because he's that 6th round pick.
I gotta wait. I gotta wait to see who they hire. I can't go through this again if we get higher.
See, this is the next step for the Jaguars. Trevor Lawrence fandom is now we're waiting on that. But
can they please? They interviewed Monken. Please, Jags. Please.
But with that being said, I'm just happy that again, Paul Patterson and I talked about this at nauseam. It was Purdy versus Lawrence last year again. Just the Trevor Lawrence stuff. I'm finally done with him being. I'm going to stop picking on him because he's not
for Purdy though. Purdy was pretty bad this year too.
He was still cheaper, and to me, yeah, I'd take him.
Fantasy points, yeah,
yeah. So, yeah,
I feel like Purdy is closer to being out of a job though after this year.
You will forever. I learned that.
No, I did not think
a contract.
I did not think that he was going to be.
Purdy's getting a long-term.
I have a lot. Like I think Purdy sucks in real life. But I've never been like a super. There's people that are way more extreme about Purdy's dynasty value than me. I always thought he would get a contract in San Francisco and be fine.
Extremism is a stupid.
Like I'm not. I don't have anti-Purdy takes in fantasy. It's all real life stuff.
Except when you say the fantasy stats that I use aren't real, but that's aside the point.
Are we? Well, it's a different game. We don't play. We're not playing real life football. We play fantasy football.
Yeah, and his fantasy stats were better.
Right. That's why I'm saying I don't have an issue with Purdy in fantasy. I'm not an anti-Purdy person in fantasy. I'm anti-Purdy in real life. And then you take because I care far more about having real life football discussions than fantasy discussions.
I should have
you
had.
take my real life takes and you apply them to fantasy.
No, I should have had the
two
clip.
separate things.
I should have had the clip ready from where we talked about this, where I used fantasy statistics and you told me they weren't real. But that's besides the point. I'm not using real data.
But I don't know.
Ryan's
this
just
will be the
laughing
first
at this
offseason
point.
I'm not that into. Well, I think that they're not real in terms of describing someone's real life value. Like I don't care about stats for quarterbacks. I care about them for fantasy quarterbacks. But I don't know. I'm a little concerned about the longevity of Brock Purdy after this year.
I'm not. He's getting his long term.
Yeah.
I
thought, like, for the season they had and all the weapons they lost, he
was fine.
Looked like an NFL quarterback to me. Like I feel like the goalposts have just so far on Brock Purdy, where that was kind of always the cope. Was he has the best weapons in the league. He's in the best schematically designed offense in the league. This is the only reason that he's doing any of it. And
they went like 7-10.
Yeah, but not just because of the offense. Like
Purdy also got hurt.
Also fell apart. He played through a fairly significant shoulder injury for a few games. Yeah, it wasn't like wow, Brock Purdy got so exposed like once Brandon Ayuk went down. No, Juwan Jennings just turned into a superstar. Like, I don't know. I feel like we've moved beyond what the original like Brock Purdy in real life debate even was, because the one side of it has just won and the other side is
willing. I don't know.
Scored
One
20
day
or
we
more
will see him without
fantasy
Kyle
points.
Shanahan, and he will be like downright horrific, and we will see.
Yeah, you just saw the goalpost move to it just being about Kyle Shanahan, like in real time.
That's always been my take.
Yeah, Brock Purdy scored 20 or more fantasy points in 9 of his 15 games in 6-point leagues. Like
quarterback.
I'm just saying.
Anyway,
I'm not concerned with him at all. But getting back to my point, which just seems to just be what happens. I was right about Trevor Lawrence. I'm going to be right about him until something drastic changes. Whatever. And yeah, drops, throwing the catchable ball is a real thing. So keep that in mind as well. And I'm going to say the last ones I'm going to end on is wide receivers. I mean, Jaden Reed and George Pickens. I couldn't be happier than to fade these guys. Ryan, I'm going to lean on you here because your tweet today just made me lol. I said last year that Jaden Reed's role would need to change for him to be someone that I was in on. It fucking didn't. He was the screen merchant. This, regardless of how good you think he is as a receiver, and if they let him do more, it would be better. I agree, but they're just not. And now we have 2 years of it, so I'm happy to have faded that one. Next, the other, can you read that one? Do you have that one on hand?
I don't have it on hand, but I have it. Basically, I can give you the Jaden Reed take.
Please.
So what I find humorous about Jaden Reed is the discourse is like Matt LaFleur's an idiot. He's clearly their best receiver. Like they just need to force the usage to him more. They need to use him more. Literally 1/3 of Jaden Reed's targets this year came on design screens. That is about as much like we're forcing usage to a player as you possibly can. Yes, he deserves it. He's great with the ball in his hands. He's a dynamic player. Not saying any of that. But if you remove all screens, his targets per route run, 16%. That's equivalent to what Marquez Valdez-Scantling did this year. The guy that we used to meme about for being the best wind sprinter in the NFL for like 5 years, that he would just post up on the outside, run 400 routes on like a 15 to 12% target per route run. Literally, that is Jaden Reed if you take away the screen stuff. He doesn't earn targets against Dontavian Wicks, who ranks like very funnily ranks like top 6 in that same stat. I'm going to be headaching over Dontavian Wicks for another offseason, I guess. So that sucks for me. But yeah, Reed, great with the ball in his hands. Doesn't seem to be, at least from what we've seen so far, not a receiver that will just go and win on the line against a defender, get open and command like a normal target. At least not at a much higher level than anybody else, all the other kind of jags on that offense. So will it happen eventually? Maybe. He was an older prospect. It's not like that shocking that he was kind of quickly got to his skill ceiling in the NFL would be the way I lean. But yeah, that's what it is with Reed.
Loved him when he was cheap. We had JJ Zacharyson on the show like last year. It was buy low, sleeper, loved him. Once he hit that upper tier, top 14 dynasty wide receiver, should have been out the door. I waited a little bit too long. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, but I love the stat. It's like, well, just let him do other things. He can do it. You put Reed's average separation score and win rate were both ranked outside of the top 40 at wide receiver. If you were to remove all
I'm
screen
fascinated
passes.
to see the Harmon stuff on this year because he scored so well in his rookie year on all those separation metrics. And I mean, every time he has the ball in his hands, he looks like the best player in the NFL. Like I don't know. I if the Harmon stuff is brutal, then I might get to your side. I'm LaFleur has a history. Like LaFleur is in the Shanahan zone for me, where I think he does so many things so well that I'm not trying to be like he's a jackass, because like obviously as a play designer he's incredible, but the personnel stuff I do continue to be baffled by, and the tendency stuff. Like this is still the guy who looked at Dion Lewis and Derrick Henry on the practice field every day and said my RB1 is Dion Lewis. Like I don't take this guy seriously with the roles that he deploys players in. The early down run stuff is absurd. And it's just, I don't know. It feels like one where it's just the talent difference between Reed and every other person on this offense when they have the ball seems so stark to me when I just watch the team, that it seems like something that just has to happen eventually.
Tucker Kraft, baby.
I'm going to continue to bet into that. But
sure, it just fading him at his previous cost going into last year was a 5th round pick. In a draft right now, he just went at the 8-9, right? Like it was the right move. His role needed to change, and it did. I did not sell I think I have 1 share left. I didn't sell it when I should have, and now I'm just stuck with it for now. I didn't buy any either, which I'm very happy with. I didn't really draft any extra. I think I drafted 1 share of them. That's actually the share I have, is the one I drafted this year. And I believe he was a 6th round pick for me. And like, okay. But I should have moved him.
Okay, but so I'm going to push back not just on Reed, but just in general on this idea that like, because I think in many ways this year has a lot of examples of guys that there's reason to believe are more talented than the numbers say, based on whether that be eyeballs or just like the prospect profile. Like JSN would be a great example of this. Like there was really no, other than his Ohio State pedigree, but like through his rookie season and then through basically half of this season, his statistical profile was pretty pedestrian. And then he caught fire eventually when, they realized like, we're going to make this guy the focal point at this point. And like Worthy is a guy who I think JSN and I think Reed are better than Xavier Worthy as a receiver, but like that's a guy where like eventually they figured out how to use him in a role that's going to do something. Like I don't know. I'm trying to be a little bit more patient and less of a slave to the numbers on a lot of these guys. Like Marvin Harrison's another guy that we'll talk about, where like we talked about the Ladd Marvin thing like a month ago. I'm in a startup right now. Ladd was long off the board, but Marvin was still there. I drafted him. Like that to me is another interesting case where like the numbers versus like the overall vibe of the player. I'm very curious. Adunze is another one going into next year. Like I'm very curious to see how these things go, where I think that the numbers are not very positive, but I'm trying to keep more of an open mind to these guys. And I'm going to be doing that with Reed too. I want to give it 1 more year on him.
Sure, but at the cost, now I'm in. Now I'll go and buy. I just thought the cost was too rich for somebody. We needed a lot of things to go a certain way, and they didn't. and it kind of stuck with and early in the year, I mean, he was being talked about as this elite. He was right up there with QJ in the benefiting from broken coverage data that we had. I mean, the Eagle game, I joked that CJ Gardner-Johnson needed to take the Kobe jersey off because I mean that dude every game he played at the start of the year, there was some screenshot of him absolutely eating dirt, right? And Reed was one of those guys. So I'm going to be more in on his price this year. This is like the classic fade at his upper tier price and buy when he's cheap. Pickens is going to be another one. He is an absolute crash out. He's a crash out. I don't even know if he's going to be on the team next year. I don't know if Tomlin's going to be on the team next year. We've seen every Steelers receiver when he's away from Tomlin self-destruct. I don't know. But he was just also another guy whose
I'm going to actually have a share. I have, he's one of 2 players in the top 120 of ADP that I actually don't have a single share of in 68 leagues. But I think that I think I might try to see what life is like as a Pickens guy next year.
Again, his price is not really going down. His price didn't really go down.
Yeah.
Again, the start.
I got Pickens curious halfway through this year, and I sent out a couple offers, and all of them were just rejected. But
he's going as a wide receiver 21.
Rejected this year.
He's going before Olave, which
every
I think
time that I want to be somewhat interested in this guy, that still doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, he's going ahead of Olave. He's going ahead of Moore, Worthy, Waddle, McLaurin.
All right, never mind.
Yeah, that's what I mean. And
whatever.
You were, like you said, halfway through the year. I had to fight Scott Barrett on George Pickens and Theo Greminger on George Pickens a lot when I would produce their School of Scott podcast. I just didn't buy it. He's the deep shot wide receiver who can be an explosive. We knew this already, but I don't think he's the one type wide receiver. He's not reliable. His hands, he's lazy. I mean, if you watch any QB school video that the Steelers are on, I think JT O'Sullivan spent so much time just commenting on the type of player Pickens is, not even the quarterback play. So that's just, I'm sorry. It can be, you could say it's whatever you want, but I am not willing to be in, and I wasn't willing to be in on a player who at any moment could either be catching a football or pile driving an opponent out of bounds on any given play on a team that's just not that good for wide receivers. I'm just not. I think he had 10 points per game this year.
I have no idea. I think it's got to be higher than that, but who knows? I guess Pickens is to other people I feel like I always like the wide receivers that have the good peripherals that are in terrible situations. Like those just always seem to be my guys where like they're either cursed or I'm drawn to them. I don't know. But like Garrett Wilson will be that for eternity. Finally, Drake London is now playing in a viable situation, but like he was that for a long time. And like I've always just had a lot of these guys. So it's just weird, I guess, that like Pickens is just a player I've never liked. That now he kind of is that guy. And I've never been the guy on the other side being like, I'd like to buy low, but you guys are still valuing this guy like he's done something when he hasn't actually done anything. So I guess I see where the Pickens truthers are coming from because I've certainly done that for several other players. But yeah, I guess I'll have a hard time buying in if he's still going to be in the top 24.
That's what I mean. I'll continue to fade him, but I feel like I was absolutely right in fading him. So there we go. There's a bunch of stuff that we got right and why, even with some pushback here, which I wasn't totally expecting today, but here we are. That's what makes this show great. You're not going to have everyone agree with you all the time, and that's important. My bonus got right, just so everyone can like kind of get off my back, was Jameson Williams as a buy. It worked out for me. I said it at the start of the year. It worked out. The games he played, because he missed a couple, more often than not, he scored what you wanted, and he had some blow-up games too. He was worth the buy. So I had that. Faded him at his absolute max price for years. Bought him when he was attainable. This is the George Pickens, Jaden Reed arc, right? Where I faded them when they were up here. I'm going to buy them when they hit the right price for me. Price is king. Price is everything. That's how it rolls with these wide receivers for me. All right, let's do the sad part. We're gonna come right back. And we're also gonna set. I missed this last time when we recorded. We're gonna settle the game. We're gonna settle our bets, and we're gonna get out of here. But like before we end, those two things have to get done because I keep forgetting. We're gonna do what we got wrong when we come back on the other side of this. All right. As you can see, tell us what we should do next. So what's next on this podcast, you can let us know by leaving a comment after you like and subscribe and hit the bell and don't miss a video. You're going to want to do it. Helps us out. It really does help us feed our family the Timbits that we need to sustain life here in Canada and wherever Ryan is, his iced coffee that he won't admit that he likes.
I'm in Dunk's land.
Yeah. Let's talk about some things that we got wrong. I'll start it off because I look like a jackass for some of the stuff that I said this year, which is what led me to my revelation at the top of this program about not buying into player takes as much. It doesn't always come back to completely bite me in the ass. But in 2024, the take who's cheaper finally killed me. The take who's cheaper on the Texans wide receiver thought process nuked me, and I don't have enough Nico Collins because of it. I was wrong. It's important to talk about what you got wrong. It's important to be open about it. It is important to not delete your takes from Twitter. It's important to look your bad takes in the face and admit it and talk through it, because that's how you become a better player. No one plays this game 100%. It's impossible. It's impossible to be 100%. Anyone that tells you that they win 95% of their leagues is playing against themselves and alt accounts, or they're full of shit. It's just period. No one gets this thing totally right. And I was horrendously wrong on the take who's cheaper. I thought Tank Dell would provide close to his WAR value. Not close until the very last game where possibly his career ended. And I needed him in that game to go to the finals. And I played him. So shout out to you, Tank Dell, for the one game that you really took off for me. Super sucks what happened, but Nico Collins was just the guy. I should have seen it. You live and you die with the take who's cheaper method. It finally really bit me in the ass this year. I was wrong about the take who's cheaper in the Texans wide receiver room. I've got two more, but I'll jump to Ryan here on the next one.
Yeah, so I mean, easily the biggest thing I was wrong about just as a theme this last year was fading all of the old running backs, which has been kind of a tried and true thing for me in redraft for a long time. I think we are at the point in Dynasty, or probably well past the point in Dynasty, where the age of a running back and the chance that their production is going to just completely go away is more than priced in to every single running back over the age of 25. To where, especially this year, it was a legitimately viable strategy to just send out second round picks wherever you could for the Derrick Henrys, for the Alvin Kamaras, for the James Connors. I guess you could throw Josh Jacobs in there too. Not that it was hard to ever get him for a second rounder, but these guys are more than capable of providing production well ahead of what you have to pay for them in a dynasty context. In a redraft context, I think it's different. We had kind of a crazy run of running backs being healthy this year, wide receivers not being healthy. I'll be writing about that a bunch, I'm sure, in the coming weeks. But the biggest thing for me was just not buying into any of the old running backs. It was huge missed opportunity because all the teams that got the playoff buys were the teams with the Derrick Henrys and with the Alvin Kamaras. If you didn't have those guys, outside of like a legitimate juggernaut that you've been building for years, it was pretty hard to get by this year without the advantage of that production. So yeah, I guess that's kind of all I have to say on it. It's going to be, I'm going to be doing my best not to be trying to like individually predict each running back like age curve fall off this year, as I've gotten kind of obsessed with in years past.
I think that's an important take. Your comment section will probably appreciate you for it. Jacob, what do you got?
Yeah, I had two main ones, although I mean we talked about Jaden Reed plenty. As much as I'm going to be buying him again next year, obviously it was a rough second half of the season after getting very excited about him. But the two guys that I focused on, and because I think that they're similar, so I wanted to group them together. CJ Stroud and Breece Hall, which were two guys that I was very vocal about in both formats, in Dynasty and in redraft, that were quite disappointing this year. And I think that the hardest part to reconcile is like just that they were, and not necessarily that I think that they will be going forward, but like at the very least for 2024, they were just IRL bad, which was the hardest part for me to see being possible with either one of them, to be honest. Like Hall have been so ridiculously impressive, both as a rookie and then as a sophomore coming off of an ACL. And Stroud obviously had an incredible rookie season. And, we had all the arguments about, I don't know if anyone was really that arguing against Hall's talent, but really it was, should you spend that much at running back? Was the argument about Hall. And then for Stroud, it's really like, should you spend that much on a pocket quarterback? And to me, like that was the only way that it could go bad. I could not have possibly envisioned how poorly he played this year. And, there's partially reasons for that are not his fault. I don't like their offensive coordinator at all. Their offensive line really regressed in a big way. But like compounded upon that, he also just played like shit pretty frequently. And, he's still alive in the playoffs. Maybe he can change that and rewrite his story this year. But far too often I was watching games and just watching him miss throws that like he clearly would have made in 2023. And I don't really know necessarily what to do with that, because I've always kind of viewed fantasy as like there are all of these grand uncertainties, what the environment is going to be, what the health is going to be, what the scoring variance is going to be relative to expectation, what someone's age decline is going to be, all those things. But like the one thing that I've generally taken as like a certainty is like, if you are young and you have pedigree and you've shown that you are elite, like I can at least rely on that you are going to be an elite real life talent. And then we just have to hope everything else aligns around that. And those two dudes just being like very, maybe I wouldn't call Hall bad, but I would call Hall at least very average and Stroud pretty bad this year in real life football is probably the thing that is making me the most gun shy and uncertain about like everything, frankly, going into 2025. Where if there's no pillar of elite real life play that we can latch onto from young players even, then it makes it a lot harder to have conviction in this environment. And it brings me more entertaining of Tom's cost focused approach for sure.
Yeah, it's important. It's important. You're right. Going from, hey, at least he's going to be good for X amount. It's why I also believe that safety and quarterbacks is also a lie. I think it's the biggest lie in fantasy. But yeah, I don't think any of that. I think that was a good point. Good points that you've made there. I want to talk about one more before I end the show on the most important one that people are going to want me to talk about. Save that for the end. Kyler Murray, QB1 overall, is gross. Talk about a guy that I thought had a legitimate opportunity to finish as the QB1, and he wasn't even Bo Nix. Right? He was just unplayable. He's for sure unwatchable. Looks like he's completely regressed. The offensive coordinator and the offense he's in we want to cope a little bit and blame that. I think that's fair to do. Kyler had a lot to do with this. It should not have taken him so long to get Trey McBride into the end zone for one. He bails out of the pocket before it collapses. His height is becoming a legitimate issue at this point for not throwing over the middle. He has been afraid to just throw it up to Marvin Harrison Jr. on multiple occasions, going back and watching the film, if you would. He is a rushing quarterback that I don't even want right now. And I wish I could get rid of at somewhat of an elite price, but you cannot. You cannot trade him for Bo Nix. You cannot trade him for Justin Herbert like you would have been able to. Fading Herbert because I believed so much in Kyler, it costed me money this year, considerable money this year. And I will be rethinking my approach to that. Not all rushers are elite fantasy options. And I'm going to take a deeper look inward and go to my darkness retreat and clear my mind of my love for Kyler. He and I are breaking up. It's over between us. It'll take me a while to recover emotionally, but it'll be better for the both of us. So, long relationship coming to an end here. Maybe he bounces back, but QB1, he's nowhere near the level of those upper tier guys at this point. It sucks, but I was wrong. I was wrong to just draft Kyler in the second round, no matter what. There were other quarterback options that I could have been more into had I just not had blinders on for Kyler Murray. What else we got? I got one more to end on. So I'm hoping one of you guys have one more.
I can give kind of a quick one. I had a lot of in terms of like trying to bargain bin shop for wide receiver production. I found myself going very often to the Amari Coopers and to the Deontay Johnsons. And
hey, Amari Cooper! Yay! Thanks for the $100.
Yeah, you're welcome.
You have to pay. See, since I lost the bet to Tom, you have to pay 50 to me and 50 to Tom.
We'll get to that.
Yeah.
Well, also though, since we're splitting a pot in a league, also we can just offset it that way too.
All right. Well, we'll just
anyway. Yeah.
we'll get to the accounting after the show.
Yeah. But yeah, on Amari Cooper and Deontay Johnson, I get this is another kind of like statistical humility lesson for me, I guess. I was very into kind of deeply diving into the Amari Cooper and the Deontay Johnson seasons and breaking down like, okay, well, these were their catchable target rates. This is like how much catchable targets are tending to regress year over year. Like I could tell like a very convincing story, at least to me, in terms of like, yeah, these guys just got screwed last year and they're awesome NFL receivers, like elite level NFL receivers that are fully capable of going out and putting up like a top 12 or a top 18 season this year, just with even average luck. Both of them got yeeted from the team that they were on in week one, which is like, I don't know, that tells me, especially in Deontay Johnson's case, that there's something more going on there. There's usually something more going on when for years and years, a guy can't score the fantasy points that go along with all the XFP and what all the stats say he should be scoring. I should have been more open to maybe this is not only the type of receiver Deontay Johnson is on the field, but there were like rumblings of maybe he's kind of a diva his last year in Pittsburgh that I just kind of ignored and was happy to ignore. With Cooper, yeah, man, it just was like, I was in the camp of like Deshaun Watson can't possibly be this bad. Like those were definitely words that came out of my mouth last offseason. There's no way Deshaun Watson is as bad as Jeff Driscoll or whichever other trio of quarterbacks that Cooper was catching passes from for a big part of last season. Oh yeah, he can be that bad. That absolutely can happen. Cooper can drop every catchable ball that comes his way on the Browns. He can get traded to another team and never crack a 40% route share like that. All of that absolutely can happen.
Yeah, I think, again, all of that is completely fair. I think it's only appropriate to end this with the hottest story of the Dynasty Points season. JSN 6th and 7th round price tag. Important to talk about it. I got that one wrong. I will say I was quick to adjust and suddenly became the highest on where he would finish on this program because we grow and we're intelligent and players become a buy when we realize processes are wrong. This was my biggest swing and miss on the year. I thought that was too expensive for me for the return I thought that I would get for a player who had such a horrendous rookie season. If I had been a little bit more open-minded to a new coaching staff, etc., and his new usage, which was that of the underneath 2-minute god that he was. I mean, death taxes and JSN getting 6 targets in the last 2.5 minutes of every half the Seahawks were down in. It was just the easiest cash bet to make through the entire year. But he had an amazing turnaround. And though it was a down year for wide receivers in general, I believe he would have finished, I had it as the wide receiver 12 or 13, if I'm not mistaken, based on last year. I'd have to re-update those numbers. I know that was from a little while ago. But he was a good player, and his 6th and 7th round price tag should have been an absolute smash given the absolute trash cans that were drafted around him that I likely drafted. He was a miss for me at his price, and I paid the price going and acquiring him in season. I paid the price. I paid it. But I was wrong. I was wrong on his price tag. I was right on the turnaround. So not an all bad, but going into this year, I will be more into receivers whose profiles I don't love, simply because I'll be more open-minded to the possibility that things change in a way that I don't foresee. This goes with Jordan Addison. It was the case for Pickens until I went and looked at what his Pickens at price actually was. No, I'll forever stay away from that. But Addison, I wish I was more in on. I kind of tossed him aside on the Jahan Dotson train, but I'll be honest, he was still kind of Jahan Dotson-y, like a little bit. So I wasn't totally wrong on that one. But again, his price, would have loved to have Jordan Addison as my 4th wide receiver on my team, even 3rd most weeks after he came back from injury. So I'll be more open-minded to these wide receivers with high upside, if you would, at these prices, especially going into this year. So I was wrong about JSN's price in the 6th and 7th round. I was wrong about not being willing to send a late first in this draft class for him. But I will also say I was absolutely right that he was West Coast Godwin, because that's exactly what he turned out to be. We now have a top 12 dynasty wide receiver on our hands. So I was wrong on that one. Hopefully you joined me in correcting your stance on that early and we can prosper. But I feel like if I didn't mention it, I would be strung up by my toes and beaten with a stick in the courtyard. So had to talk about it. There you go. There we have it. Quick break. We come back. We're going to settle up who won the game, who won the bets, and then final thoughts before we get out of here. Going to want to stay locked in. Okay, we have to mention Jacob absolutely dismantled us in the weekly pick games at 859.26 points. So shout out to you, Jacob. Congratulations. Hard to believe that I was in the lead for like 3 weeks in this season, and then you just had an unbelievable Linsanity run that we could not catch up from. So shout out to you. Second was Lucas with 760.56. I was third at 729.92. And in his rookie season, Ryan came in last at 673.14. He'll be looking to bounce back. What this means is Jacob is picking the beverages that we will be consuming, and I am nervous about this, for the live draft coverage of the NFL draft. We are on after the Scott Barrett's, Joe Dolan's, Brett Whitefield's. We talk about the dynasty impact of the draft, and we just have a great time. And we'll be at the mercy of Jacob and what he decides to put us through. He put Billy, the retired Full Tilt host, almost on his ass with a full menu of beverages, and he had me really hurting last year as well. So once again, Jacob, you are picking the beverages.
I can promise that iced coffee is going to factor in heavily to this year's theme.
Should I get Kahlua on tap?
It would only make sense after this year's content. So we'll see. We're gonna have a lot of options at our disposal. I'll have a full day planned. At least one per round that we're covering. I think we always do. I know we do a little snippets after the first couple of days. We'll have the full day 3, I suspect. I mean, I'm not making an announcement, but I'm not in charge of those things, but that was the case last year. So if that is once again the case, that sounds like at least 4 drinks for that day. So buckle up, buckle in. I
can't wait.
So looking forward to two straight years. You would have thought, right? I only won last year because of Ryan, because Ryan subbed for me one night, and so I got to use his picks, and then he had like the best week of anyone the whole year. So I thought once Ryan joined the show full time that it was going to be Jover for me. Nobody dives into the weekly matchups more than Mr. Heath, but he choked. He's a choker.
Yeah.
So.
Don't dive into the weekly matchups until Wednesday and Thursday, it turns out. So,
right. When it's Tuesday night, Ryan, it's too bright. Turn them off. Turn them off.
You're saying he goes
too bright.
You're saying he goes full Darnold on Tuesday nights? Is that what it's looking like?
I was acting out a popular Twitter meme, but didn't seem like anyone was picking up on that. But
I don't live chronically online, Jacob, so that one definitely went over my head for sure. We had some bets that were made on this program live on air that we will talk about. Ryan and Jacob had a $50 stake that Cooper will outscore Shakir at plus 200 odds in PPR points per game on a minimum 6 games played. Jacob, congratulations. You won that bet.
Yeah, lifelong Khalil Shakir Cooper fan over here.
Hey, you and the Guru would get along. Guru,
yeah, it's funny. I love Shakir as a prospect, and then I admitted defeat when he fell like the 4th round. I wish I didn't. I wish I had held the faith. But after being drafted in the 4th round and doing absolutely nothing for 2 years, then I gave up. This is another, way like lower stakes example. This is another example of I'm gonna try and be less of the spreadsheet version, because like this is a dude that I really loved in college. He always looked sick when he got the ball in his hands. There was nothing in the per route usage that would suggest through 2 years that this player was anything. Like it was like 13% targets per route run. And I should have incorporated more of that boy nice model into my process, because that all of a sudden the usage really changed this year for Shakir. But yeah, Amari Cooper, mega wash.
Then the second big bet we had on this program was that Russell Wilson was going to start more games for the Pittsburgh Steelers, barring injury, than Justin Fields. And that hit. So shout out. I appreciate your $100 donation.
I thought early in the year that this was we were going to have to take this to court. I thought we were going to be taking this to court, whether or not Russell Wilson's injury was real. As Justin Fields is racking up starts, it looked like but then Russ just won it straight up. So there'll be no
for better or worse. To be fair, by the end of the year, they should have been playing Fields, but for better or worse, they for the betterment of my wallet, I should say, they stuck with Russ Wilson. So shout out to that. Let's get final thoughts on 2024 before we sign off. Don't have any final thoughts on 2024 before we sign off?
I don't know. You said 2 hours though. It was a fun year. It was the first year that we've done the podcast with this combination of everything full time all year on Fantasy Points with Tom, Ryan, Lucas. More exposure for the podcast. Very, very fun getting used to this new routine, this new little family. I absolutely look forward to seeing you guys every single Tuesday night. Historically, in the previous days of this podcast, this would have been our last episode for 4 to 6 weeks. Tom is an absolute trooper, so that won't be the case. It's going to be my last episode until after the Super Bowl. I'm going into prospect hibernation / law hibernation, but I'll be back with a vengeance with prospect takes ready in mid-February. This was an absolute blast of a season working with you guys, and I cannot wait to do it again all off season and for the 2025 season.
Love that.
Yep.
Love that, man.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself. I'm very grateful and very thankful for you guys letting me into your little family here this year. I've had an amazing time. I also look forward to this. It's always great conversations. I always learn something whenever I would listen to the show before being on it. And now whenever I'm on the show, I always learn something. So yeah, one of my favorite parts of the week. And yeah, looking forward to another year of amazing conversations with you guys. Yeah, it's been great.
Lucas isn't here, but I know he shares the same sentiment. He is off on a secret mission that we're not allowed to talk about. But I'll say that, yeah, for years with Full Tilt, I was partnering with this group and that group and this group, and we finally found a home here. Fantasy Points has changed my life. Starting this podcast as a note app in my phone every week to talk shit to our league, to asking Jacob to join me every week, to the point where we started this podcast with you coming to my house. We did this in person at the beginning. And in 5 years, here we are. We hit new records, not just for us, but for the website. We were the most downloaded podcast in general at FantasyPoints.com on the Fantasy Points Now feed. We had one of the biggest live streams in terms of fantasy content on the year for Fantasy Points, in a year that Fantasy Points has really taken off. We couldn't do that without all you guys. So I'm eternally grateful for Fantasy Points changing my life. That includes every person listening, watching, liking, subscribing. We say that a lot, that it helped us out, but it really does. And I wouldn't have it any other way. I will say adding Ryan this year has led to some of my favorite moments on this podcast, from Shania Twain to rum to iced coffee being more talked about than the podcast itself. Truly added an element to this show that we were missing since Billy had left. So shout out to you, Ryan. We appreciate it. And shout out to everyone. That being said, that's the end of the show. I want to leave the show with one of my favorite clips of the season that I have here. I'm going to play that as we sign out. But I want to keep in mind, this year, my family lost my foster family. Paper, our grandfather, passed away this last week, and I hadn't talked to him in a while. And it leads me to say, I always say to check in on your loved ones, even if you're not sure that they need it. And I mean it, because you don't know. So check in on your loved ones, even if you're not sure that they need it. Shout out Paper and the entire family. But remember, first and foremost, this game is fun. Keep it fun. Keep it fun with your friends, your family, and enjoy it. Remember that clear eyes and full hearts can never lose. Your best days are spent tilting. I'm going to leave this show on one of my favorite notes with one of my favorite clips that we've ever had on this program. Good night, everybody. Leebs from the Fantasy Points Discord said, didn't Ryan already give his hot take with his iced coffee take? And you're right.
That's why he's not on this episode.
He didn't want to face the music is really what it is. I do, however, have his hot takes, even though Ryan's not here.
Where is Ryan tonight?
Ryan is busy with ass. the new metric at Fantasy Points. He is writing an ass article that does not feature Megan Thee Stallion.
Like, I was just picturing Ryan just going nuts out on the town. He's just like, ah man, I won 5 for 5 first time a couple weeks ago. He's like the rainmaker out there.
Oh, shout out Ryan, man.
Give me that ass. Hey babe, what are you up to tonight? I'm working on some ass.
I'm just studying ass, like every nerd does. I got ass in the spreadsheets. You know what I mean? We could actually confirm now. That is the average separation score that we'll be releasing soon.